If you're looking to learn more about the world of international education, be sure to check out our book, International Education Leadership: Stories from Across the Globe. You'll hear from 13 different international school leaders from all parts of the world and backgrounds sharing what makes international education unique through their leadership lessons. And now, on with the show.
Somewhere out there, in a classroom or staying up late at home, a teacher is planning that next great lesson that will inspire and change a child's life. Whether they're looking for new, innovative ways to engage and motivate students, or connecting learning to real life in a hands-on way, it's always with the end in mind and the context of global citizenship and advancing our humanity. Join us on our search for leading voices in education across the globe as we convene to talk about the topics that matter and inspire all educators in the pursuit of that next great lesson. Welcome to Educators Without Borders, presented by SchoolRubric.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Educators Without Borders, where we convene educators from across the globe to talk about issues that matter. Today, we have a very interesting, important topic on international education. How do we get the best educators and staff for our schools? If you don't know it, international education is its own animal, it's its own little thing, and not too many people know about it, but it's one of the fastest growing sectors in education. In many cases, international schools bring teachers from overseas to teach without ever having set foot in the country. So it's a challenge to find that right fit. And so today we've asked three experts to join us and share their experience with us. We have Gustavo Sever, from the Superintendent from the Colegio Internacional de Caracas in Venezuela. We have Dr. Phan, the founder and CEO of the Diversity Collective. And we have Dr. Dana Watts, who is the Director of Learning, Research, and Outreach from ISS. I'd like to pull them on camera and welcome them all to our panel today. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
So before we begin our discussion, we have 4 questions and a robust discussion ahead. I'd like to turn the floor over to each of you so that you can tell us a little bit more about yourselves so the viewers can learn a little bit more about you and your work. Dana, could we start with you?
Sure. I'm Dana Watts, and I started working with ISS approximately 3 years ago after being overseas for the majority of my career in India and Thailand and Hong Kong. And the focus of my work has been on professional development and how do we best, and that was the focus of my dissertation, really. I've been kind of a PD addict, and how do we best meet the needs of international teachers and leaders around the world and what's unique and different about them. But in addition to that, I've also been actively trying to figure out how we get more women in leadership, because there's such a few, we're severely underrepresented within the international school community. And then through that, I've done a lot of work with the Diversity Collaborative and really trying to open up leadership and figure out ways we can open up the pipeline for more diversity and leadership around the world.
Well, thank you very much for being here. And we look forward to learning a little bit more about your work as we weave through these questions. Alan, I'll pass the baton over to you.
Yeah, that's a great segue. Hi, everyone. Alan Phan. I am actually head of school for North London Collegiate School here in Ho Chi Minh City. It is a startup school. I'm also the founder of the Diversity Collective, and the website is diversityfair.org. It's down right now because we're revamping. But just following up with what Dana just said, I'm very passionate about recruitment for LGBT and people of color. And so I dedicated my dissertation and doctorate work on gender, ethnicity, leadership in international schools. So this topic about recruitment and retention is very close to my heart. And so I'm really excited to talk to Dana and also Gustavo about everything.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan, for being here. Gustavo, let's pass it over to you.
Sure. Hello, my name is Gustavo Sever. I'm currently the superintendent at Colegio Internacional de Caracas in Venezuela. I'm a native of Venezuela, but this is my first year. I just finished my first year as superintendent at CIC. Before, I worked in Chile, Bolivia, Curacao, and the States, always in Latin America, for 23 years, so working overseas. And during the time that I worked in Curacao, I had the opportunity to not only be a high school principal, but also during the 15 years that I was there, I had the opportunity to be the HR manager. So this talent acquisition and it's very close to me, and I have seen the changes, at least in Latin America, where is the region where I have been the most.
All right. So you can see we've got really an outstanding panel here and three outstanding experts, and I am excited to learn from each one of you. Before we begin, just to talk a little bit about the format, we've got 4 discussion questions, and so we'll go through that today. It'll take about an hour if you're joining us and want to kind of keep track of time. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that this is part of a course in a series. So if you're interested in learning more about the wacky world of international education, if you're interested in learning more about recruitment, whether you're an administrator or a teacher or even a board member, I want to invite you to go to schoolrubric.org to click on our courses section, and you will see be able to register. It's free, and you'll be able to take a deep dive with us in exploring some of these concepts. And so we've asked some of our colleagues from around the world to pose some questions related to international school recruitment. And so let's kind of take a look at the first one, which has all to do with pipelines. A lot of us in international education like to joke that it's a well-kept secret. But the truth of the matter is, we won't be able to attract the best educators for our schools if we don't increase the pipeline. And international schools continue to grow and expand. What are some ideas that could help bring more exposure to international education as a career opportunity? All right, pretty interesting question to get us started off. And I can say from my own experience, I stumbled onto international education. I was a public school teacher in New York City for 6 years and just was frustrated and tired of the public school system and looking for something different. And I happened to stumble into international education and went to the UNI Fair, which was in Iowa in 2009, in the middle of anyone who's been there knows that it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and just kind of stumbled into it, got an offer within the first 30 minutes, and off I was to Columbia. And a lot of folks that I've spoken to have stumbled onto international education in a very similar way. So I'd like to open up the floor. What can we do to bring more exposure to international education so it doesn't become a happenstance, but rather something that people legitimately consider as a career opportunity?
I'll go ahead and start because I actually stumbled onto this in 2000 before it was actually an ISS fair, Dana, a long time ago. And it wasn't something that was online. I had to go through a lot of paperwork to get through the paperwork to get to be a candidate for there. For me, I think right now what I do is because I go back to my university and actually speak to the graduates there, or about to graduate from University of California, Irvine. And so I've done it several times, and because of COVID, I haven't done it. But I go back to the graduate programs, speak about the international schools, the opportunities, and also just explain a little bit more about the different types of international schools and the different pay rates and the different locations, doing that. And also really right now with social media, you can actually post it and blast it out pretty much everywhere. And it gets quite a bit of hits right now. And the other thing is actually creating an area where you can provide opportunities for local teachers as well to go internationals. Because being in Vietnam, being Vietnamese American, I see that teachers here are quite proficient in English, and just don't have the opportunity to go overseas. And this might be an opportunity for them as well.
Yeah. Dana, Gustavo, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of just like a myths and stories that don't make that people believe you need. Like constantly, people ask me, "Well, how many languages do you speak?" Or who are the students? Like, how do you even communicate with your students? And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, that's not part of the process. And so I think people think. And I do think, back when I first started thinking about teaching overseas, I was accepted into the Peace Corps. I was all ready to go. And everyone kept saying, oh, you're going to be, teaching in a hut somewhere, which wasn't even the case for the Peace Corps, much less is it the case for international schools. And I think there's a lot of, we can do more to help people understand what is the day in, day out life look like of an international teacher. One of the conversations that I just heard at a conference we were engaging with in a conference, because I was just at a conference for leaders, and we were talking, and most of the people had just transitioned back to the States. And one of the things that they said was the main difference is when you're overseas, you're teaching with teachers who truly want to be there. They have picked up their lives and moved across the world to put themselves in a new environment. Where sometimes when you're teaching, perhaps in the States or in your own host country, that is the school that happens to be in the neighborhood that you are in, but it's not necessarily the school you would choose. And so there's a difference in the mentality of you're proactive in searching out a school that matches what you think fits your pedagogy and instructional design in the international school environment, where you may not find that. And I think that's a big difference perhaps with some of our teachers.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And I mean, one of the things I would say too is I think it's not a secret that there's a teacher shortage in the United States, particularly in public education. So it's difficult already for schools in the States to recruit, retain, attract some of the best teachers and the best talent. And so, obviously bringing those folks to international, you're already drawing from a low talent pool. But one of the things that I would always say is, people who go overseas and then come back to the States have such a different experience and bring so much wealth of experience and culture back to the public school system. Of course, some people go international to stay international, but some people go international and then have the opportunity to come back to the States. And I think that's a very enriching experience for their school communities when they ultimately decide to repatriate. Gustavo, anything to add from your end?
Sure. I believe that, the teachers that we look for and the profile of the candidates we're looking for, they must have a curiosity for different cultures, different languages, and an openness to different learning styles as well as challenges. On the recruiter side, I think it's important to be as transparent as possible, to share, about the country, the host country, the school, because our main goal is to make the experience for the teacher, for the students, and the school a rewarding experience. This is not easy, but there could be wonderful schools everywhere in the world, but not all the candidates are the right fit. So you might have an excellent candidate for a particular school that might not be the right fit for my school. Okay, right. So I think that conversation that in the recruiting process, in the talent acquisition process, of being transparent, honest, telling the good and the bad, the benefits and the growing opportunities, are the political situation of the country, the challenges in transportation, in food shortage, so it's important to tell, it's important to share, because the more they know about our school, our host country, the easier it will be for the teachers to transition to our school and our culture. I think it's a practice that I have always used. So I try to always describe the country situation and the school situation as best as possible, so there are no surprises when they arrive to school. So that would be it from my part.
Sure. And maybe just a follow up before we kind of conclude on this question. Alan, I was really struck when you said that you have an opportunity to go back to your university and maybe speak to some graduate students or some teachers in training, which I think is really a great idea to increase some of those pipelines. It seems like there's only a handful, maybe I'm wrong, of universities that include an international element or include some option of sharing international education with their students. What can we do to increase that pipeline so that teachers who are up and coming and prospective teachers can learn more about international education? What can we do as international school educators and leaders in that sphere?
I just think we just need to reach out to the dean of students and the deans of the faculty there. I think it was, for me, I felt like it was my duty to go back to the university and give it back to the university. So I reached out to the dean of education there, and I just spoke to her, say, I'm always here every summer or winter. Would you like me to talk about international education? And she just jumped on it, and it was really well matched. The first time I gave a talk, they were expecting 5-10 students. I had 50. So there's definitely interest there. And so it was really nice to see that. And so I would like to really continue to do that. This summer's been crazy for me. I didn't do it, but I would like to do that in the coming years when I visit California.
Yeah, Alan, thank you for that. Yeah, that's a great idea. I think, I think that's something that I should be doing and really sharing my experience. I think us as international school educators kind of have an obligation. That's something that we all feel so passionate and that we love. And for me personally has really changed my worldview, and to have an opportunity to share that with other folks is a really important thing. Dana, I think you wanted to add one more thing before we move on.
I did. So one of the things that I was trying to do pre-COVID, and I just started doing again, is I started reaching out to all the local universities that are within like driving distance of where I am right now, or places where we host recruiting fairs, and offering to come and just talk to students within their undergrad or graduate programs about the benefits of teaching overseas. I think they don't know what they don't know. And I mean, we've all kind of alluded to it, but it's the best kept secret in education. It's a phenomenal way to teach and to see the world and really expand your teaching practices. And I think the more voices that they hear from and that about different people's experiences, the better. And like maybe 2-3 weeks ago, my co-author and we put together a book on how to become an international educator. We ran a free webinar just to help people find out. We had 170 people sign up in the middle of the summer at 8 o'clock in the morning. Like, who really wants to like sign up for that? And so there's an interest out there on what does it mean to be an international educator? We just need to keep spreading the word and giving back, just like Alan said.
Yeah, Dana, maybe this is a good segue before we jump into the next one. Tell us a little bit more about your book. I'd love to hear a little bit more about it, because that's yet another way to kind of increase the pipeline, right? The more literature that we put out there, the more resources that we put out there to educate folks on international education, the more they're going to be able to know about it, and the better decisions they're going to be able to make about their careers. Yeah,
so my when I was working, like Alan said about giving back to your university. So this is the small little book that we put together called Becoming an International School Educator. And it's stories, tips, and insights from teachers and leaders in our international schools. But I wrote this with my dissertation chair. So I kept telling him and talking to him about what an amazing experience it was. And he was like, all right, he said, that's great. That's your experience. And he knows an insane amount about international schools. And he's been out to our schools, but he said it needs to be the voices of many, because just one person can have a great experience and then that's it. So we pulled in 23 different educators. We invited anyone who wanted to contribute and submit ideas. And we tried to look at different ideas about what does it mean and what are all the different experiences, whether you rose up as a host country teacher within your school or you were overseas and you did something completely, all these different pathways, so they could hear what those experiences are, just so that people can have a better idea of what they're walking into and what that might be.
That's an amazing book, and they can pick it up on Amazon, I presume?
Yes.
All right. Well, you're probably one of the first people that I know anyway that has been doing a dissertation and then got their dissertation chair to write something. So congratulations to you on that. And if I may make a shameless plug too for one of the books that I've been involved with, it's called International School Leadership Stories from Across the Globe. And what we ended up doing is we ended up getting 13 international school leaders, and you can see all their photos here. I co-authored it with two of my really good friends and colleagues, Lindsay Prendergast and Katarina Chen. But we also got a lot of other folks involved in the book as well, 13 of them, as a matter of fact, and they all shared different leadership stories, because it's not just about leadership lessons, but it's also about living and working overseas in an international context. And so we thought it would be really cool to have them do some storytelling and share some lessons through that. But we have used some leadership frameworks there. So this is a great read for any aspiring or current international school leader. And so I recommend that you check it out, Stories from Across the Globe. And so this is just a great, two other great ways to increase your skill set and knowledge, and also increase that pipeline for international school educators. So let's move on.
Where is it available, Wallace?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, and you can also, there's also a Kindle version, because we know that shipping a physical book may be a little bit difficult, but it is available on all the Amazon marketplaces, from Amazon France, Europe, Italy, Japan, things like that. But it's also available on Kindle if you are having some difficulty accessing the physical book.
Good.
All right, so let's move on to question number 2. I am loving this discussion, and let's talk a little bit more about recruitment agencies. The large majority of international school educators are recruited through a small handful of recruitment agencies. What are some best ways for both recruiters and educators to utilize these services, and what responsibility do these agencies have to innovate and improve the recruiting ecosystem? All right, Dana and Alan, I know that in our introductions, you talked about your passion for representation and things of that nature, and some of the work that you're doing. So maybe it might be great to have one of you start us off and let us know what you think about recruiting agencies and what they can and should be doing.
Alan, do you want to start, since the work you've been doing is so innovative and awesome?
As a person of color, and I'm also very openly gay, and so to go out recruiting was actually quite challenging. And so that's why that was the first thing was for me is that's why I dedicated the work to recruitment and also leaders in international schools with gender and also ethnicity. And so I said, you know what, I've done really well in my life and through my career, and also just through a lot of hard work. And so I said, I need to give back to the community, give it back to people like me. And so I said, you know what, there isn't any support system for people of color or LGBT and also women who want to go into leadership, especially women of color. So I said, why not start a recruitment agency that focuses very specifically on that? And so we decided to start it open. It's completely open and free right now, because I said, this is my social justice, a social responsibility fund that I'm going to do this myself. Fund it all by myself, created a website, and said, so we're going to open it up to all people of color and LGBT and women to look for leadership positions, and also just recruitment in general. And so, and that opened up, we got over 300 candidates and 75 schools to sign up in the first few months. So we're really happy with it. And so now we're revamping to do that again, starting this August, September, when the website will be ready again. And then on top of that, what I did was I also do consulting work on implicit bias and recruitment bias training for schools to recruit people better. I mean, by looking at their different aspects of people rather than just experience. And so, we need to look at the person of color and say they can add value to the organization, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the experience. Because if you're looking for 20 years experience as a head of school, you're going to find a white man. I'm sorry. You're not finding anybody. You can't even find women, maybe 10 years for women. And so, but beyond that, you won't see anybody, and you certainly will not see a person of color in that role. And so if you're just purely looking for experience, then so that's what recruiting agencies, what we all have to do is change the way we look at the qualifications of people and what value we put on the different characteristics of people and the perspectives they bring to the school as well.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I agree. And I think we really have to look at, what are our preconceived notions of what makes a leader? And too often we look at, where did they go to school? What are their previous roles? What have they done? And title tends to be a big issue as well. And it's like many times, I just had this conversation in the past 3 days with someone who said, I don't know if I can get a head of school job because I haven't been a principal. However, they've been the school-wide director of learning. The director of learning oversees all of the teachers, the school-wide policies, every capacity. So and has a K-12 lens. So why would that not be considered the next step into a head of school job? And too often, I feel as if that there's a difference. Some leadership teams like to say, "Oh no, we're diverse." But if you look at it, there's a big difference in between the front of house and the back of house. The front of house that students get to see tend to be male, pale, and stale. And then when we look at behind the scenes, who's doing the director of learning, student support, admissions, it tends to be that's where some of the diversity happens in some of our school leadership teams. So our student bodies aren't seeing themselves represented in the school leadership within our schools. And we can open up those pipelines, I think, by really looking at how are we providing leadership responsibilities within our schools. So in some of the research that I've done, especially along the lines of professional development, we tend to provide more leadership opportunities to middle school and high school teachers because they're single subject teachers. So they're able to open up into facilitation and leadership type things. In an elementary school role where we have far more female teachers, and this is just from a gender lens, but then we tend to, they don't have the leadership, they don't have a budget, they're not ordering the books for their entire department, they're not overseeing the management of everyone in grade 5. Where in a high school, if I'm a high school English department chair, I'm overseeing my entire department, I'm doing all those things which are the next steps into that next middle leadership levels. So opening up the pipeline would be really, really helpful. And we need to look at the ways we can do that through recruitment and through professional development as well.
Gustavo, I'm interested in your perspective as head of school in Venezuela. What have you found useful in terms of utilizing the recruitment services? I'm not sure where you do most of your recruiting through, but what's been helpful on your end, and what can or should recruitment agencies do to help you do your job better and bring better teachers to your school?
Thank you for that question. And based on my experience being basically in Latin America during my whole career, I normally use AMISA, it was known as ASA, because it concentrates on Latin America and the Americas in general. Why do I choose that agency, and how has it helped me acquire the talents that I want? First, because the pool of teachers that attend these fairs have a special interest, whether in the culture or in the region, the language, or they have a connection somehow to any of these. for Latin American schools, Caribbean schools, it's very difficult to compete in international fairs where you have schools from Asia or the Middle East, because the reality is that our benefits and packages are not as attractive as schools from these areas that I mentioned. So I think that by attending this fair, I'm already filtering the type of candidates that I want. Now, going back to the question of the shared responsibility and how agencies should improve in their practice, I think that, and I'm going to very basic, I'm going to the safety of our students. So for me, it's very critical to have a very thorough background check, not only done by the school that I work at, but also by the agencies. Regretfully, in one of the schools that I worked, I had a colleague that was arrested for child pornography production, and he's in federal jail. So that has really impacted my career and the way I see this part of the job, of the talent acquisition job. I think it's very important because people who have not gone through this have no idea how this events affect the culture of the school tremendously. So, and then, you know, I think it's also important to, when I visit and review the different schools that I have worked at, I find that one particular school was very, and country was very open to diversity, where some others you will find that they're very conservative, and probably certain type of profiles wouldn't be the right fit. And I'm not talking about the school, the right fit for the school, the right fit for the candidate, because at the end, what you want is this person that you're recruiting to be happy, you know, and to be accepted as they are, whether there is sexual orientation or color or whatever it is. So I think that when we recruit, we have to have that sensibility of, you know, be empathetic, you know, be on their shoes and say, if I am him or her, would I feel comfortable in my own school? Yes. Wow. So those will be my two thoughts about your question, Wallace.
Sure. You know, one of the things that
can I just jump on that?
Yeah, please, Alan, go
Wallace. Just because things.
Yeah, please go ahead, Alan.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, I'm a little. I think my internet's a little slow, so lag behind. So I think one of the most important thing is actually, you know, for me as a person of color and also an openly gay man, I think it's important for us to let me make that decisions about where I should go, not the school or the person making the decision for me. So I think one of the most important thing for me is that you tell me it's safe, or like, of course, if I'm not going to go to a Middle East country where they will, you know, they can kill me for being openly gay. But I will make a decision to go to Latin America where they will say, hey, if you're openly gay, it's fine. And if the school is fine with that, and then I'm fine by that, then let me make that decision. So I think it's important that we allow people to make the decisions rather than we make the decisions for them and saying that they might not feel safe at the school, or they might not feel good at the school. And be honest about it, the challenges they may face, and let them to come to that conclusion.
I'd like to piggyback on. Oh, go ahead.
No, just validating his thought. I think it's a good way to move on this.
I think there also needs to be more transparency. It's like on both ends, right? Well, I don't know about on the idea of the recruitee, but the recruiter, right? Like, I would like schools to be able to say that they are a safe school for certain things, and not just LGBT, but like anything, right? Like, so I was a single mom who raised 3 kids overseas. I would go through the entire interview process and be a finalist, and they'd be like, oh, we can only give you a visa for 1 child. I'm like, you know what? you could have saved so much time if you had told me that from day one. Like, this is months into the process, and I'd be like, really? Which one of my 3 children do I get to keep with me, and who am I giving the other 2 to? You know, like, we aren't upfront about who we are as schools, and schools need to be more transparent about, you know, this is a school where we openly, you know, support and help and have systems and structures in place for these different types of people and different backgrounds. And sometimes they're just not, and you don't find out until it's too late, which can be really difficult, because then it's too late. You're already in the country, or you're in a situation, and there can be issues and problems.
So Dana, do you see that as something that is the responsibility of recruitment services and recruitment agencies to say to a school, hey, look, if you want to list your vacancies with us, if you want to be a member school with us, then you need to make a commitment to have a certain level of transparency and report these things? Or is this more on schools themselves to self-report and be open and transparent, and hopefully there becomes a critical mass at some point where other schools feel the pressure to do the same? What do you think about that?
I think both. I'd like to see it happen both, you know, for schools to have some autonomy in that, and so that they start to do that, but also the recruiting agencies start to also help make sure that it's hard to know, though. So many of our schools try to say that they're great at things, and then they're, you know, when you peel back the layers, maybe they're not. And so it's hard. We don't want recruiting agencies to then become also almost, you know, accreditation agencies on what within those different aspects. But one thing that I know, I've been speaking a lot with ISR, International School Review, which I know it's a double-edged sword, right? People go in there to complain, but you also can hear some good things in the ins and outs of the school. But I asked them to include a DEIJ question about the school and the school leaders in their assessments of the schools, so that we can start to hear. That's a good place to start to hear the ins and outs of whether a school is safe for people.
Yeah, I think one of the things, I guess, just to conclude my thoughts on this and just let anyone else jump in, is I kind of wonder who's responsible for keeping all of this data and information. I think if we start talking about schools and what they stand for and what you can get with a visa, or, you know, representation in terms of, you know, what are the different opportunities we're giving to underrepresented populations, then you have to have information on this. You have to have data on this, right? And so I'm not really sure who has that responsibility. I don't know if these are accreditation agencies and they need to add something to their process where, you know, there's different things that are being reported. I don't know if this is the regional associations where, you know, they're getting schools together and they're getting schools to participate in this. I don't know if this is the recruitment agencies, if they're saying that, hey, look, as a condition of recruiting with us, then you need to report on these things and we need to put some things together. Or this is just the schools themselves and leaders in schools trying to do the right thing and getting more educated over time. But I do think that the recruitment agencies probably have a role to play in this because they're kind of, in my view, the gatekeeper to folks getting in the door.
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. Having a great time. Let's move on now to our third question, which I think Gustavo already talked a little bit about, which is finding the right fit beyond just pedagogy. So let's take a look at our third question. Moving forward with an international school educator position is a tremendous leap of faith for both schools and candidates, and often extends past proficiency in pedagogical practices. What do you believe are the most important factors for both sides to consider to help create the best fit and probability of success? All right, so I'll start this question off by saying that, I did recruiting when in 3 separate countries. I was a school leader in Guatemala. I was also in Colombia and also in Nigeria. And of course, we wanted to find teachers that, had great pedagogical knowledge, were great with kids, that knew, different curriculums and different methodologies. But a teacher, with all that said, a teacher that might have been successful in Guatemala may not have been successful in Nigeria, and vice versa. And so beyond just talking about pedagogy, beyond just talking about teaching methodologies, international schools have this element of finding the right fit for your school community, for the country. And so what are some ideas that we can share with both teachers and school leaders to help find that best fit? Gustavo, maybe we can start off with you, because I think you talked a little bit about it already in some of your recruitment practices.
Yeah, I think I will refer back to the first question that had to do with transparency. I think in order to find that best fit, we need the schools need to be very open and clear, transparent about what the school offers, what are the challenges that the country or the city has, and be as clear as water. And we could use different means to get this information across, whether it is conversations with teachers that are currently at our school, videos, testimonials, because what we want to create at the end is it's a win-win situation for the teachers, for the school, and ultimately for our students.
Yeah, one of the things I found that was really great for me as a strategy was I could tell a lot of things about the school, and I could feel like I was being really transparent and honest about it. And I could direct people to the website and everything like that. But one of the things that I found most useful was, let me put you in touch with another teacher that actually lives and works at the school. And so they're going to give you the lowdown. They're going to let you know in a very transparent way what the real deal is. And so they can then make a judgment for themselves to see, hey, look, the administrator that I've been talking to at the school has said X, Y, and Z. This is now being affirmed by a teacher that doesn't necessarily have, a stake in the game in terms of the recruiting process, and can be really transparent with me. And it's just kind of teacher talking to teacher. Alan, what are some strategies that have worked for you in your recruiting experience?
I think going back to what Gustavo said about being really honest about it. So I have worked in, a London and a Barcelona. So those two have the London factor, Barcelona factor. And so the fit is actually quite easy because people just want to be there, but not actually fit to the school. But then I also worked in India, Chennai, India. And that was, I had to be really completely open and honest with people, saying it's a challenging living situation, but the school is a fantastic school. And so I think if you're looking to grow as a professional, things like that, I said, then you come. But it also will challenge you personally. And so if you want to grow personally, you will also grow from that experience. I think from being looking for the right fit is really asking the people, what are you exactly looking for? Is it location outweighs what you can learn and teach? Or is it that the location is or the teaching and learning from the school is going to be really important? And so it's just like one thing outweighing another. But I think it's really, you have to also ask the candidate to be very honest with what they're looking for as well, because sometimes they're not completely honest of what they're looking for because they just want the job. And so that doesn't fit and it doesn't work well with us either, because then they come and they're not happy with it. So an example I can give you is, for example, in Chennai, India, single men did not do well socially, or single women did really well socially. And so I said, hey, if you're a single guy and you're looking here to come here to get married or meet somebody, you're not very successful. It's just from stats that we've had. And the women it's the opposite. Because women don't go out as single women in India, whereas more single men can go out. And so we were just giving those tastes of it, and then people made their decision on their own.
Yeah, that transparency is pretty interesting. Dana, any thoughts from your end?
I think that it's kind of like a matchmaking service, or at least recruiting agencies kind of are, or can serve in that process. And what is a good fit for one person is not going to be a good fit for another person. And it really, and a lot of it, you know, the international school community, because we're so we're constantly transitioning, right? And a school can change on a dime. So too many schools rest on the laurels of in the past and their reputation, but the school can change overnight with school leadership and different changes within the boards and things of that nature. So it's really just finding the right fit at the right time. And I miss being face-to-face at recruiting agencies, because at recruiting fairs, because that part, although I love the fact that it's become more accessible online, it also is harder. Like a couple of years ago, we had a school in Lisbon, and the line, there were probably 40 teachers in line to go interview with this school. And I thought, okay, all of you are not getting a job today. Like, it's not going to happen. However, I started talking to everyone in line while they were waiting and saying, what are you looking for? What kind of leader do you want? How do you want to grow? What kind of experience are you wanting? And so, you know, I said, okay, well then when you're done with this, here are 5 more schools you should go check out. And like being able to help them kind of figure out where they can grow and what's the best fit for them. And that part really that's about knowing the schools and knowing the people who are at those schools. And that's a hard fit. But once you find the right fit, it's amazing.
Yeah, it just seems like to me that there's kind of like this double layer, and I'm not really sure which one's the chicken and the egg, or if they both coexist, which is finding the right fit for perhaps the country and making sure that a candidate is going there for the right reasons and is understanding what they're getting themselves into, but at the same time, understanding the school composition, the school demographics, the school culture, the school programs, and making sure that you're a right fit there. Maybe just a follow-up question, Dana, you mentioned a little bit about recruiting fairs, and I know you expressed a preference to be able to be in person and to be able to meet folks in person. It seems like the trend in recruiting seems to be more and more virtual, more and more Skype, more and more Zoom. I was in Nigeria, and I went to all of the in-person fairs, and it seemed like to me, for whatever reason, even back in 2014-15, that I would say more than half of my teachers were recruited via Skype. That's what we were using back then. Gustavo, Alan, what are your thoughts on virtual recruiting versus in-person at a fair recruiting?
Well, the dynamics have changed completely, and the scenarios have changed in the last 20 years. The last recruiting fair that I attended before the pandemic, there were more positions than candidates on site. So that tells you right away that the ball is on the candidates' court, not on our court. So and it is true. Even though there were lots of candidates, not all the candidates attend the recruiting fair. If you ask me, I definitely prefer the in-person, face-to-face interview because, well, I don't know, it's more personal. It's you can have a complete outlook of the candidate and vice versa. But it is also true that most of the candidates that we all hired lately are via Skype. So therefore, I refer to my comment from before that selection of candidates by the agencies have to be very thorough and carefully selected, each one of those candidates, in order to guarantee that we're getting the best options, even though the ball is on the candidate's court, definitely in today's market.
Alan, what's been your experience on virtual recruiting versus participating in in-person job fairs? What's your preference? Positives, negatives?
I think I feel like I can be successful at both, with the virtual and also in person. I think there is a slight preference for me in the in person, just because you just you have that personal connection with the person as well, and also some social aspects is you seeing a different layer of that person. But I also can it can be also detrimental to a person. When you have a 5'2" African American woman interviewing for a leadership position, sometimes she just passed over because of purely her stature and what she looks like. And so I think it's really important that we also look at all those aspects very carefully. And so that if you are in person online, then you don't see the stature, the behavior as much, because then it goes in favor of some people as well.
All right. Well, thanks for engaging in that kind of segue and additional question. Let's move on to our final question of our session, and ask to identify an opportunity for improvement, but also a strong practice in international school recruiting. Many current international school recruitment practices have largely remained the same in a rapidly changing sector, whereas other recent changes in recruitment practices have largely been reactionary versus proactive or preventative. What is one strong practice in recruitment that you believe should continue, and what do you believe should be revisited by school leaders in recruitment agencies? All right, so maybe we'll just pass around the horn here and just identify one strong practice that you believe should be emphasized and continued, and then one opportunity for improvement in international school recruiting. Who'd like to start us off?
I can start if you'd like.
Sure.
I think that one strong recruitment practice that has recently come into focus is a lot of schools are looking at diversifying their school leadership teams and just their teachers in general within their schools. And so I like the fact that they're starting to focus on that. I think it's okay, it's late in the game, but they're doing it. However, the opportunity for improvement is, do we have systems and structures in place to support those people? So they didn't just click a box and say, okay, now we hired a person who fits this and this and this and this, and then we're sending them off to these countries and to these schools, and the schools aren't actually there to support one another. It's to support those people and have support systems in place. So the retention of those folks is, I think, an area of improvement for all our schools. But I like the focus that they're starting to really look at who are they putting in front of students every day.
All right. Alan or Gustavo?
Well, I think for international recruitment and also just agencies in general, we do a really good job connecting the candidates and the schools. And also because of the online platforms, you can see a lot, you can learn a lot. You can read a lot about the schools. You can read a lot about on the different reviews as well. And so I think now the transparency, the openness of schools are starting to be better. And so I think what Dana is saying about the DEI work is, I would say we're still way behind. It's a good start, but we are so far behind still, and that many schools don't even know. So I've done workshops where I'm actually the only person of color presenting to 20 people in a school when they're trying to recruit. And I said, even then you'd also look at lots of men as well. And I said, okay, well, first of all, you need to look at yourselves first and make that change. And so I think one area is really to be a really reflective school. Schools, people say they were reflective, but are they reflecting in their practices and how they recruit? And so I think looking at through that lens will be quite helpful, and exactly what you're looking for, what you value in the candidate will be a really huge improvement forward for a lot of those candidates who are looking to, especially, make a jump to leadership.
Words of wisdom. Thank you for sharing, Alan. Gustavo?
Well, as I think it has been mentioned before, honesty, transparency are key in the recruitment process. That's something that for me it's non-negotiable. Sharing as much as possible, connecting potential candidates with current teachers so that they can share ideas. And definitely, I like to consider also local growth within the organization. So finding perhaps local teachers that never had the opportunity to be in a leadership position within the organization. Some of these people have no interest of continuing their international education abroad, but they are definitely key people in the organization that could do much more. Sometimes we oversee the human resource that we have in our own schools.
Right. And maybe, you know, just to add for me, I mean, I think there's been a lot of work in the past few years around child protection and recruitment and background checks. And I think, you know, the ecosystem and the international school environment has come a really long way. There's still more work to be done. And I'm hopeful that the DEIJ work, which I think has hit, you know, kind of had a spark over the last year or two, kind of follows in that similar fashion. So I do think that there's been some good work done, certainly more work to be done. One of the things that I would just kind of put out there to think about is just thinking about structures and systems. I mean, I've also often wondered, why are all international school contracts, or the majority of international school contracts, 2-year fixed contracts? That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I do think we need to be informed a little bit more by data. So what is, you know, what are those longevity and tenure and, you know, retention data looking like? What is that recruitment data looking like? And that can start making informed decisions to schools and to recruitment agencies and say, well, maybe a 2-year fixed contract isn't the best type of contract to model to offer in this particular situation. And so I think there's a lot of, you know, opportunity there. As we close out today, I want to thank each one of you for this conversation and lending your voice and perspective. But I do want to ask each of you maybe to provide some last words for our viewers and some last piece of advice. You know, we've had some really great conversation today, but also, how can we get in touch with each of you if you want to learn more about your book, about your work, about your website, connecting with you on social media? How can we do that? So maybe we'll just pass it around one more time before we close out. Gustavo, can we start with you, and then we'll pass it over to Alan and then Dana.
Yeah, for the recruiters, piece of advice: share. Be honest, be an open book. And for the candidates, do your research, feel that inner voice, and go with it. Do your homework, and connecting with me through social media on Instagram at Mr.Sever, Sever. Also on LinkedIn.
All right. Alan?
So for me, I mean, you can find me on Twitter, tweet Alan Phan, quite easy. And also for all the people of color, teachers of color, LGBT, you know, if you are interested in recruitment, especially leaders, reach out to me via Twitter or also on the diversityfair.org. And also just for a teacher of color in general, we do have one-on-one conversations with you if you want to have that conversation with me and Aparna, my colleague. And so that we also will reach out to schools on your behalf to talk to them as well, just to talk about their safety. How safe is it for you? Going back to what Gustavo was saying, so that we understand their perspective, and we also understand the school's perspective and your perspective as well. So reach out. We're here as a resource, and so don't be shy.
All right, Dana.
Awesome. My one piece of advice would be that I think we all need to mentor, support, and think about tapping someone who doesn't look like us, who doesn't believe what we believe, who hasn't had the same experience as us, and to try to help them into the process. Because the more diversity we have in all those different aspects within our schools, the stronger our schools become. And then for connecting, I just want to say we do a lot of data collection through the Diversity Collaborative. We still have a lot more to do, but it's a collaboration of all the different schools, all the different recruiting agencies, people coming together, and I'm part of that data committee. But we are trying to gather data, baseline data, to help us so we can improve. And I wrote down a bunch of the ideas that you had Wallace to bring back to them as well. And then for connecting, you can find me. I'm Teach What, whether that's on Twitter, that's on just about everything for social media. That's how you can connect with me, or through ISS.
All right. Well, thank you again for being here. I want to encourage, if you're watching, reach out to these folks. They have such a wealth of information. I've learned so much. And so I know that by connecting with them, you'll be able to learn much more. I also want to remind all of you to check out this course at SchoolRubric.org, where you can really do a deep dive into international education, into both recruitment and retention. And make sure you check out the book, International School Leadership, Stories Across the Globe, and make sure you check out Dana's book as well. So again, Dana, Alan, Gustavo, thank you for joining us on Educators Without Borders.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks for watching and learning with us at School Rubric with educators from across the globe. For more access to articles, magazines, podcasts, live episodes, our international school directory, courses, and more, visit us at schoolrubric.org. Thank you.